Yeah, I was going to say that the PowerPoint I wanted to share isn't working because the sound isn't working on it. So when you guys do a recording, a video recording, it's really important to double check that your sound is working. I've done, I've taught entire classes before, not understanding why nobody was following along. Well, not entire classes. It only was about 5 or 10 minutes because somebody wrote in, but I wasn't recording it, and it was for, I was supposed to be making a recording for everybody to use later. So that's happened. If you do have to do a PowerPoint, please, before you send it in, just play it back and make sure that everything is working on it. Okay, I'm sorry. I put something in my mouth right before doing this, which was a dumb idea. Okay, some of the things that I wanted to talk about today, are I wanted to look at, go over the paper mache a little bit, talk about the foam carvings. I want to talk about getting the stuff done and turned in. And then I want to look at some examples of ready-made stuff that people have done. And let's see, and uh, talk about the cocooning quite a bit because I mentioned that uh, last I mentioned that last week we were going to look at the cocooning this week, and I wanted to make sure we cover that. So let's see. I'm also going to review the quiz a little bit. Okay, and one of the things that I'm looking at really quick is how much people have turned in. And okay, and one of the things that I wanted to share was Readymades that people had done. So I'm gonna pull those up really quick so we can look at them. Um, one of the things that I think is important is that I don't always do is trying to make sure that your private information is not shared with everybody. And so one of the things that I try to do is prep all the images that we're seeing by either putting them into a file or a folder that we can look at, or by enlarging my view just enough so that you can't see uh, the person's name. And that's what I'm going through and prepping right now. Let's see. And I'm almost there. All right, that's looking good. Okay. So we're going to go through and talk about each of those things. And the first thing I wanted to do is look at somebody had reworked their uh, biomorphic carving, and I wanted to just share that with you a little bit. I don't know, you probably don't remember what this looked like last week, but I'm just excited. When you guys redo stuff and turn it in, I really I really appreciate that. It shows that you're working extra hard, but it also shows that you demonstrates that you are caring about your grade. And when we looked at this last week, one of the issues was there were some tool marks. It looks like there's a little bit right there, but a big issue was that the whole thing object wasn't rounded. And so this artist has gone through and rounded everything really well and done a lot of really good sanding. And I wanted to point out right here is a tool mark, and all the rest of this is just the sandpaper pulling the foam out. It's foam, it's going to do that. And if I knock off a point or two because I think it's tool marks and you write me back and say, hey, that was actually the sandpaper on the foam, um, that's fine. Just let me know. Because when we start doing the paper mache, we're going to get rid, we'll fill in a lot of this kind of texture. The tool marks are a little bit more difficult to get rid of. So it looks like to me, this person I would recommend that they just sand this down enough to get rid of that tool mark, unless doing that is what's pulling the foam away. But that brings me to a really important thing as we get closer to the end of the semester. I first look at everything that you haven't turned in and get that turned in. And second, look at everything that has been turned in and double check the points because you may not have gotten full points for something. So just look at what's missing. One of the most common ones is people at the beginning of the term were only turning in 4 things that they saw during the video. And so they would miss one of the points for attendance. And it's just a little thing, but if you're missing a point for each of your assignments, and all it's going to do is all it's going to need to fix it is to double check everything and resubmit it, then do that. There's no reason that everybody should not be getting an A in this class. So, and I think that that is a really important thing for everybody to consider. Now, okay, and I'm still kind of setting things up. Okay, good. Okay, almost there. And then I want to look, well, something that I noticed with everybody is that this module 6, the assignments are kind of weird because they involve basically things that you're talking about. And that is one of the big points of the ready-made exercise, and then also to get you the right frame of mind for the cocooning exercise. The reason why that's important to being able to articulate and use it is, and why we're doing this at the end, is you guys have had the semester to kind of play around with that idea of the 4 tools of artistic critique. Describe, analyze, interpret, and evaluate. And now you've gotten to the point where um, you're a lot more comfortable with those kinds of concepts and thoughts that we've been dealing with. So I want to, what you write about now is pretty good because if you guys had tried writing about it just like a month or so ago, it just it wouldn't have the same kind of punch and it wouldn't sound as mature as everybody is sounding now. And I really appreciate that. You guys are doing a great job articulating your thoughts as we move forward and look at different things. So that's to recap. Well, we looked at the biomorphic abstraction, reminded everybody about the things that need to be done. Um, I think what I would like to do is talk about the paper mache, and then we'll go switch from paper mache, go into the conceptual art, and look at the 5 ready-mades that people turned in and go through and critique them. And then we'll talk about cocooning. And I think by that time, we'll be pretty close to the end of our time together. And Anna, I am going to be doing a lot of screen sharing, so I can't see very much. If your microphone is working, please just toggle it if you want to make or say something if you want to make a comment so I can make sure that you're heard. All right, so we're going to go back and look at this object again. And I hope it'll make sense in just a second as to why we've got to sand it down. So I look at this, and then if I go over to where that video, and we look at that video again, and I'm just going to share with you really quickly what my screen looks like. There's the introduction to paper mache and the mighty Voltron sculpture revisited is what I'm my clever title for um, this. This is what you're going to be turning in. This is the portal for turning that in, and it's basically taking your foam carving and applying paper mache to it. And if we look at this, this is what the carvings look like, and this is the same carving. Just this is one side of it, and then this is the other side of it. This is what the carvings look like after they have two layers of paper mache on. And last week, the question was asked, do we have to sand it down to the foam? Absolutely not. What you're doing after you put the first layer on and let it dry, you're going to apply the paper mache. I'm sorry, after you apply the first layer of paper mache and let it dry overnight, you're just going to go through and sand down the wrinkles. There might be some loose paper and stuff like that that you didn't catch. You're just going to sand it down so it looks pretty smooth. You're going to put a second coating on, and the second coating is going to be a lot easier to get smooth. When you've sanded down the first one, it's going to be a lot easier to get it stick to the foam. When you've done with that second layer and get it as smooth as you can with your hands, then you're going to let it dry overnight and sand it again so that's smooth enough that you can apply paint to it and then give it whatever textures you want. And on this, this is the demonstration that I did. And I just want to watch it and just comment on it a little bit. And hopefully it'll kind of make sense as to why we want this object as smooth as possible. Now you notice that it doesn't have any tool marks, but I didn't get it so smooth enough to look like blown glass. Um, However, being this smooth, it makes it so that it's a lot easier for the paper mache to attach to the foam. Paper mache doesn't do an awful lot of good, doesn't do a really good job sticking directly to the foam. And I'll show you how I solve that problem. But in this first part, I'm demonstrating how to mix it. In your kit, you should have a container and then a bag that has flour in it and a bag that has glue in it. And the glue, it should look like that bag of glue that I just pulled up, where it's kind of yellowy. It's an Elmer's wood glue that hardens really, really hard. Now, since I was hiding a really gross wall behind me, I was in one of the studios and the wall behind me was just really nasty. That's why the stuff disappears. But in your Tupperware container, I put about half of each of those two materials. And it shows I kind of jumped the gun. I put the flour in first. What you want to do is put the liquids in first and then put the flour in. And in this case, the liquid is a glue. So I'm putting about half of the glue that I got into it. And I'm measuring it by eye. I'm not weighing it or anything like that. And on this, you notice that I did put down a piece of cardboard. You want to make sure that you have something to protect the surface that you're working on and be really careful. Don't get anything on the floor. For me, when I work, I will put down some paper I'm going to throw away on the floor, and I will put a garbage sack on top of the table that I'm going to be working on. And that I'm just cleaning up the bag after I close it. So the glue is in this Tupperware container. And I also have a pitcher of water. Now, you notice I'm not wearing gloves. I would highly, highly, highly recommend you wear gloves because the gloves are going to protect your skin and it's also going to protect your hair. the little teeny hairs. Now that water, what I'm not showing is I'm putting in this about the same volume of water as the volume of glue. If I have 3/4 of a cup of glue in there, there's going to be about 3/4 of a cup of water. But you notice I didn't measure anything. All of this is kind of guessing. And then I'm going to put in about half of that flour. So I put the glue in first, then the water, and the glue and water are about the same amounts of both, and then about half of the flour. And I'm going to start mixing this with my fingers to get all the lumps out. So I'm mixing the flour into the liquids. And yeah, I'm kind of stirring it at the beginning, and then I'm going to be squishing the lumps as much as I can. When you do this, the best way to do this is to mix this a couple hours before you're going to be doing the initial paper mache. And it gives plenty of time for the lumps to kind of work themselves out. And notice that I am mixing a little bit more water in. You want this to be about as runny as a melted milkshake. So it's not going to be totally liquid, but it's going to be maybe not quite that runny, but it's not going to be thick and blurpy. It is going to be pretty fluid when you get all done with it. But the flour gives it a lot of strength, and the glue and the water mixed together give it a lot of flexibility. So I'm mixing that around, mixing. And then I'm taking the newspaper and I'm tearing strips off the newspaper. And this right here, you can't see very well because the background magic is hiding the newspaper. But I'm just taking a single sheet of newspaper away from the rest of it. And then I'm going to start tearing strips off the newspaper. The three different options that most people think of is newspaper, paper towels, and magazines. But the three options that I suggest are paper towels, cloth, and newspapers. The reason is that magazines have a clay or plastic coating on them, and they do not work very well with paper mache. And if you're not wearing gloves, the printing comes off and it's nasty. It gets all over your skin and everything. We'll probably talk about it more in just a bit, but the cloth, I've people have gotten really cheap sheets from Desert Industries or Goodwill and cut those into strips. I don't like that because it gives a lot of texture to it that you have to sand down, and that can be a pain in the butt. Paper towels, same kind of deal. Paper towels can leave a little bit more texture. So my preference is newspaper, and I highly recommend you use newspaper. Now notice I just got that in there. I didn't soak it for very long. I just dipped it in and got every surface wet with the glue. And then I'm kind of squeegeeing most of that mixture off. And I'm laying it onto the foam. And one of the problems that I have when you watch this is that it's not sticking to the foam. Well, it's not going to stick to the foam. The glue doesn't stick to it. And in this case, I didn't make long strips, but what I'm doing is I'm applying a strip, holding it in place long enough that I can get another strip to kind of glue to it so that the strips are kind of glued to themselves. And that's what they're holding on to. I kind of tighten them up and smear them around. I'm smushing that glue into some of those foam holes, and I'm using the paper to kind of hold it in place. So this is dipping it in, squeegeeing it off. And if we were meeting live, I'd be doing this as a demo in front of everybody. But now notice that I'm sticking it to that original strip, I'm looping it around and sticking the other end to the other end of that strip that I put on first. And now I'm kind of using my glue covered fingers to kind of smear stuff around and mush it around. What I would recommend is areas like this, I would make the strips long enough that a single strip can loop all the way around and then touch itself, because that glue sticking onto the glue of the other part of the strip is going to make it a lot easier for everything to hold in its place. And one thing that you'll notice right away is that wider strips are for more gentle curves and wider areas. Narrower strips are for the tighter areas. And I do a lot of squishing and kneading with my fingers to get the glue in the right place. And that's one of the reasons why this first layer is going to take a couple of hours. It may take a couple hours. You could probably might work faster than me, but as soon as you have that first little area done, that the subsequent strips of glue can stick to, or strips of glue and paper can stick to, then it's going to make it a lot easier and it's going to go a little bit faster. Is getting that first strip on there is kind of a pain in the butt. And you have to constantly move this around because you see that there's little wrinkles, like right there. There's wrinkles, there's um, bubbles, different things like that. And so this first layer, you're going to have to really pay attention to and knead all the strips into place. And again, I have a big piece of cardboard covering the table. Do this with a piece of like a big garbage sack over the table to protect the table. I will have, like I said, something underneath my feet that I can throw away. And then the garbage bag, when I'm all done with everything, with both layers, then I'll pick up the mess on the floor, put it on the garbage bag, wrap everything up in the garbage bag. And if I didn't cut the garbage bag, I can turn it inside out, or I can just dump it into another garbage bag. And I have, single single bag that I can take to the garbage can. Do not, do not, do not, do not dump any of this down the sink. That is just a recipe for disaster. I know it says you can clean it up with wet water. Yes, you can clean it up with wet water, but as soon as you do, you throw what you used to clean it up with away. Do not put any of it down the sink. It clogs incredibly easily. Okay, so that's what I'm doing. Then you can see more and more of this is getting covered. And I just want to, I don't remember if I covered the whole thing in this, but that is what the paper mache process looks like. It is messy. That's why I highly recommend that you use gloves. So notice I'm attaching it to previous strips and everything like that. Then I'm kneading the glue. And in some cases where you have, so I'm going to pause this. I'm going to get back to that image of the carving. In some areas where you have like this, where the sandpaper pulled chunks of the foam out, you're going to do a little bit of more kneading because you'll need that to smooth the paper down and get the glue in those areas to hold everything together a little bit better. And then the second layer that you apply after this one dries and after you sanded it, that second layer is going to be a lot easier on you. It may not take a lot less time, but it is definitely going to be a lot easier on you as you do that, as you do it. So I hope that that really helps with the paper mache. Anna, did that help you understand what's going on with the paper mache just a little bit better? Okay. All right, good. Anna said yes, it helped. Thanks for going over it again. All right. Now, one thing that I would like to talk about, before we do go over the conceptual pieces that people turned in, I want to really quickly look at the quiz. And so we're going to look at the quiz really quick and just explain some of the issues that I've been having that are just really weird. Now, Anna, um, did you get the PDF that I emailed out to everybody with the images? Okay, good. One thing that I noticed that was kind of frustrating to me is most of the pictures showed up because I revamped everything. I uploaded the picture photos and everything like that. Most of them showed up, except there was one person in this class when I opened their quiz to grade it. None of the pictures, I mean, half the pictures were gone. And I don't understand because after that person, I thought, oh, I need to upload them again. All the other quizzes were fine. So it's just kind of aggravating. And I really like the suggestion from the previous class to go ahead and send those out. I did that. If you did not see it, let me know and I'll re-email it to you. But I emailed it through the Canvas email platform. So, and one thing I noticed too is like today's Wednesday, Friday and Saturday, I went through and answered all the emails that I saw. And then Monday, I double checked and everything looked fine again. And then yesterday morning, I went through and I saw that there were emails that had come to me over the weekend that I had not seen. So I thought that I was refreshing my pages and stuff like that. I've got to be more careful with that. If I regrade something after you resubmit it, or if you need an answer on a question right away, you have my university email in the syllabus, and you also have my phone number in the syllabus. And with that phone number, you can text me, let me know your name and which class or section you are. This is section X02. And let me know what your question is, and I will answer it right as soon as I see it, which my phone is updating all the time. Unless I'm driving. Saturday, I drove, Friday, I drove up to Provo, and Saturday, I drove back down from Provo. And there's back to St. George, and there's about an hour and a half area on the highway where I don't get updates on my phone. But for the most part, it makes it a lot easier to uh, connect. If you're having problems with email, I'm not regrading fast enough, just send me a polite message, text it to me with your name in the class, and I will take care of it as soon as I can. And also, if you have specific questions about assignments and assignment updates, tell me what the assignment is. That really makes it a lot easier. I've had, and you would not believe how often it happens, but I've had several classes where people have said, "Hey, I resubmitted my assignment and I haven't seen you grading it again." Well, I'm not going to because if I don't know which assignment it is. The system is usually pretty good about letting me know what's going on, but if it doesn't, then that's why if there's a question about what assignment it is, if you just let me know, then I can take care of it. Anyway, Anna, have you resubmitted anything that I've had to regrade? Okay, all right. But it's really important as we get closer to the end of the term, go through your Canvas stuff, make sure you've submitted everything that's due and everything that get everything in over the next three weeks or so. And then also go back through and anything that you didn't get a perfect score on, look at my notes and redo it. And on a quiz like this that we're looking at, if it's something like, we get a true or false answer or something like that, or it's just one question that's off, then there's a little dialog box down here where people make comments on the assignments and stuff like that. You can put the answer in that if it's just like one or two things and you don't want to take a whole quiz again. And then because I don't always see the notifications that people have made comments, you will need to email me and let me know, or text me and let me know that you updated quiz for module 5 or whatever like that. Okay, so this is the quiz for module 6. The first question is these are all things that you guys, it's right out of the textbook, but it's stuff that you are all comfortable with because all of you guys have a lot of experience with 2D or digital art and you understand color. And so, this is not going to be difficult for you guys. And if you have any questions, go to the library, check out one of the books and take care of it there. Roy G. Biv, of course, is the 7 rays or colors in the rainbow. And I don't know if any of you guys know why it has to be 7. Um, the reason it has to be 7 is not because the color wheel is based on 3, and so there's 6 colors. Indigo and violet are lumped together as purple. But the reason why this is 7 is because the person who came up with this was actually Newton. And the dude who discovered and was able to articulate gravity. And um, Isaac Newton was also into alchemy, and it was in particular spiritual alchemy. And 7 is a number; it's a sacred number. Every culture on the planet that has developed levels of technology that involve um, looking at the stars, keeping track of time in the heavens, and metallurgy they've all used the same 7 planets for that process, and they all have discovered and smelted the same 7 metals in the same order. And 7 is a sacred number for several different religions, but that's why this last one, it's red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and the last 2 are indigo and violet instead of purple, so that it's 7 visible colors. But that's why nobody cares, but I thought it was interesting. And then this, of course, we're talking about the fairy godfather of conceptualism. He's actually a really funny guy, but I include in one of the um, discussion pages or in one of the assignment pages a link to an interview where he talks about his work, which is really cool. And found materials, I talked about this quite a bit in another section. A lot of the sculpture that I do now incorporates found elements or is made, it's an assemblage of found elements. And most of the things I do, I'll make some of it, like I'll make a box or I'll do other things with it, but a lot of it is found. And there is something when you're using objects that other people have lived with for a while, there is a specific um, atmosphere almost to them where it feels like they belong to somebody else. And there's a little bit of a weight to it where people see your object and they see the wear and tear on these things that go into making your object. And they just, whether or not they take it a little bit more seriously, there's an inclination for people to at least look at it a little bit closer. And that kind of numinous wear that implies gravitas or importance, I like to refer to that as happy ghosts. And I enjoy finding stuff at antique malls and antique stores and thrift stores and things like that because I just love using objects that were in somebody else's life for a while that they loved on some level or they appreciated and they used. I just there's something to that implies a sense of life and connectedness that I really enjoy. And I also like that. So that's one reason I use found materials. Another one is I love finding things to use in my sculptures that most people have a specific expectation about. And when I use it in the sculpture, that expectation changes. I recontextualize it somehow. And I love that because that has a tendency to get people involved. They look at it, they know what it is, they recognize it, and then they start asking themselves, why is it in this context? How does it fit? Oh, yeah, I can see how it relates, but why does it relate? And what does it have to do with the original meaning? And that internal dialogue that most people have when they look at found objects, I think is fantastic. And then there's also a couple other reasons listed in the textbook. Now, these are photos. I re-uploaded all of these photos, so there should not be a problem with any of them. But these were the ones that were giving other people problems. And on this question, this is the most commonly missed question, and it's not because people are getting it wrong. Sometimes they will get it wrong, but a lot of the times it's because of misspelling. And they spell complementary with an I right here, which means um, they're saying something good about somebody. And that's not the complimentary that we're using. The complimentary that we're using is is a word that means it gets along with somebody or something. And when I see that, I will change the points so that you get points for it, even though the computer doesn't recognize your creative spelling. So that's that. And then another most common one that people are missing is we look at question 6. These are natural and applied colors. Well, this is natural. That's how the stone patinaed over time. This is, I think it should be hopefully obvious to people that the paint is applied on the stones. The only time I've ever seen colors like this occurring naturally is after the rain on a sunny day at Cedar Breaks, and also after the rain on a sunny day in the Badlands in South Dakota. And everywhere else, the colors are not quite this vibrant. There's some like the coral reefs here in Utah. There's some really beautiful stuff if you catch it right after a rain. Now, if we look at this, is this applied or natural? And the people that have missed this question have said that this is natural. Well, the leaves are natural, and Andy Goldsworthy, he uses all natural materials, but look at how he carefully selected these leaves, graded them with color from yellow to orange and tan, and then he put the brightest yellow right up next to the tree and scaled everything back from that. And so this is now, even though the leaves are natural, he's applying the leaves in specific colors as if they were paint. So this is definitely applied. So if you miss that, that's why. And I love what you guys are saying about these. You guys get it completely. I mean, everybody's getting this. There's a couple people that didn't quite answer the question, and I asked them for more clarification, and they'll get those points as soon as they clarify it. But everybody really gets this. You know what's going on. What's the difference? Now, if you have done this and resubmitted it, and you've resubmitted it, but it's not in the form of retaking the whole quiz. It's in the form of a comment on the discussion part commentary of the assignment. Then email me because I won't get a notice that you made that change. So email me so I can come back and give you more points. There's no reason that everybody can't get perfect scores in the quizzes. And I also really appreciate everybody has some really good insights as to what Frank Crow is doing here. And I love that as well. And something that I notice about this class too is you guys really get psychological meaning and symbolism of colors. And so when you talk about these things, are able to articulate what you see in such a way that it's pretty clear you know what you're talking about. And I really very much appreciate that. So anyways, but that's the quiz. Now, the next thing I wanted to go over was module 6, and this is where we're doing conceptualism and all that kind of stuff. And I'm calling it contemporary processes. If I open this up, I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, here we go. All right, contemporary processes. The background, we look at several different artists. Some of them are doing things where they're using objects that are, ready-made objects. They're using found objects in their work. And the reason why artists will say found object when they're using somebody else's garbage is because when you say found object, it sounds serious and it sounds like you have intent behind it. And a lot of the words that artists use, um, there's a certain amount of implied hoity-toityness because, I mean, I'm sure that all of you have somewhere in the extended family somebody that just can't take you seriously because you're an artist instead of having a real job. And that is an ongoing frustration. And I think that artists over the last 150 years have just developed a knee-jerk reaction to respond to that by appropriating words for different uses. And so we say found object instead of garbage or leftovers. There might be more to it than that, but I kind of doubt it. Now, when we talk about conceptual art, all art on some level is conceptual because all of it is designed to engage people's minds. But as we were discussing last week, Conceptual art is art that specifically we are targeting people's imaginations and thoughts. We want them to engage intellectually with what we're doing. And so the end product of the art is not a physical thing, it is the engagement with imagination and thoughts of the person who views it. We kind of send our ghosts to have a conversation with the person's brain, essentially. Now, if you remember last week, I had everybody watch Plato's Allegory of the Cave, and it's an allegory that really does a good job of talking about uh, what if you see a different layer of reality and how can you interact with other people. But it's also talking about engaging worldviews, expanding worldviews. And it's also talking about what is the realm of the real, what is truly real. And Joseph Kosuth, I think, does a really good, solid job in engaging those ideas. This is about 45 years after Dada, which was the first real movement to engage all of these kinds of questions. And conceptualism, I think there were a couple art critics that referred to it as neo-Dada or the new Dada. And what is interesting, though, the biggest difference between those two movements is if you remember what you learned about Dadaism, Dada was specifically trying to engage people in internal conversations with uh, taking back their right to determine what art is instead of letting somebody else tell them, as well as engaging viewers in a conversation about specifically, is this art? Is this valid as art? And then also in conversations about what are the things that we use that we validate as art. By that I mean what really goes into a poem or literature. If it's just the words in a Dada play or a Dada poem, they may just have words in alphabetical order, or they may have several people talking over each other because each of them are saying the poem, but they're saying different parts of the poem at the same time. All the words are there, but they're just not in the order and presentation we're used to. Or a play may be something that specifically has the different elements of a play, but mixed up or stacked on top of each other. And it's designed specifically to get people to challenge their own expectations about uh, what is a painting, what is a sculpture, what is a whatever it is. And the three people that, or the three different groups that can really satisfy the idea, of the question of what art is first the artist, second the viewer, and then third, a lot of us give power to the people that run galleries and museums and allow them to tell us what the art is. And Dada was all about the viewer and the artist reclaiming that right to declare what art is. And so that's Dada, and then move forward 45 years, and in conceptualism, the artists that practice conceptualism assume that their audience is smart. They assume that you are ready to be engaged intellectually. So they're not doing things to confuse you. They're doing things specifically to start conversations. They don't want to tell you what to think. They don't want to manipulate your thinking, but they want to develop an atmosphere, an environment to start engaging with them in an internal conversation about the questions brought up by their art. So in this example, 1 in 3 chairs, we talked last week a little bit. Here's the one chair, and we have a photo of it, documentary black and white photo of this exact chair, and we have a printed description of what a chair is. So 3 chairs and one chair. But also, what could be the one chair? Well, we're only looking at this as a photo itself, so this isn't even a real chair. And then we look at that definition. Well, what does make a chair? Yes, this is a chair too, but it's not really functioning as a chair. It's just an image on the wall. Nobody can sit on it because a chair, part of the validity of it being a chair requires that it's useful to sit on. And then we start thinking, well, or is that what a chair is? Is a chair just a form that we associate with something that we're comfortable to sit on? And you can see very quickly the person viewing this, the artist has created an environment where the person can start asking these kind of questions of themselves. And they may start thinking about elements that Plato discussed, where he was saying there is a realm somewhere. The perfect definition of the things that we encounter here in this physical world exist. And somehow, as spiritual beings, we connect with that. So when we see the sun, we recognize it as the sun. When we see a cat, we know that it's a cat, regardless of the color of fur. We recognize that it's a cat. There's a certain size. And even if it's missing a leg, like a friend of mine had a cat where one of its legs was missing. We still knew it was a cat, even though it didn't fill the definition. And then Wassily Kandinsky, who wrote Spirituality and Art, he talks about the that one of the artist's roles that we have is to observe our own culture and critique it on some level. Where we do things specifically to get people to engage in thinking about the water they swim in, essentially. Think about the culture. And most of us take that for granted for so long that we don't even realize when somebody asks us to examine our own society, our own place in society, or what we're doing as human beings, sometimes can be really unnerving because most of our life is built on habits that we've generated to help us to pass the time. Oh, that's one way to look at it. So all those things are going on. I think that's wonderful. And then this video right here, this is the cartoon of the allegory of the cave. And then I want everybody to watch this video right here. This is an interview that Marcel Duchamp gave where he talks about the 13 Readymades he made and what they mean. And what is so fun about the Readymades to me is you find an object, give it a completely new context, and you can completely redirect person's expectations, but also cause them almost immediately to start being self-reflective about their own assumptions. And that really provides a door for people, if they want to start examining, like Cy Twombly said, start examining the water that they swim in, the world view that they exist within. Remember, this assignment has two parts. One you turn in as the first part, and one you turn in as the second part. The second part is where you're submitting it for the discussion so everybody can look at it. And on this, people are also need to comment on 3 of their fellow students right there. And they comment, I give a little bit of rules about that. So you're engaging with other people in the second part of the discussion, or the second part of the assignment. For the first part, you have a photo that recontextualizes the object, and then you have 3 paragraphs. The first one talks about what the object's history is. Second one explains your title and recontextualization. And the third one is your validation for the thing being art. So we're going to look at each of these that have been submitted so far. Anna, is this explanation of conceptualism and what we're doing, is that making sense to you? Whether or not you agree with the idea that conceptualism is a valid art form, is how I'm explaining it making sense? Okay, good. Excellent. All right, so this is one object that somebody turned in. Excuse me. There's a couple things I like about it. First is this is an excellent photo. It's on that infinity screen that everybody makes with the sheet. Excellent. Nicely done. Second is that we can all tell what the object is, but it's laying on its side. It's not in the standard context of display that it would normally occupy. So those two things are really good. And I like the fact that it is dramatic. It's very black and white. Even if they didn't use a black and white filter, that makes it pretty dramatic. So let's look at it. Okay, so it's originally a clock, and the function would have been to tell time. Decorative stand, supporting the clock, acting as a stabilizer, and it's also a decoration. It's a knickknack. It's something that enlivens a room. Another word for it is prestige item. It's something that you display to show that you have enough wherewithal that you can put a certain amount of resources into an object like this and have it so that the only function it serves is to tell time and look at. So it's a piece of home decor, they say. Now, the title is The Collapse of Time. And I love that title because it's laying on its side. What else can that title reference? Well, it doesn't have any other context. I mean, it's in an infinity screen, so it's hard to give it a physical context. But if it's called The Collapse of Time, it's laying on its side, so that's kind of obvious. But maybe this is no longer working either. And then we also start asking ourselves about the relationship of this object and the title to our own understanding and appreciation of time. By turning it 90 degrees and laying it on its side, it recontextualizes it, and the clock is now supported by the ground. And that's really interesting. I like how they're talking about this. And then it's become its own artwork in that the new position conveys the message of collapse of support. Yes. So they're talking about specifically um, how it is how that has changed its context. And then the numbers, because they're in this different way, they become less legible. I like how they say that this starts representing a W. And I think that it's really interesting bringing that up too, because if this was with a 12 at the top and a 6 at the bottom, it wouldn't be confusing. But this, it kind of implies just a subtle hint of the confusion. I like that. So excellent. I think they did a really good job on that. Definitely recontextualizing it. All right. So the next one, okay. All right. So here's the image. They used a sheet to make infinity screen again, and then pose this. It looks like a glue bottle, and then the name they gave it is peeling skin. So it's school glue with a twist top lid, standard, dries quickly, all that kind of thing. And then they do mention, I like this, glue was created around the Egyptian period. I like that. Title of this piece is Peeling Skin. When I was young in school, we passed the time to put glue on our fingers, and when it was dry, we'd slowly peel it off. And it's entertaining. I like it, and they put it on the side to make it look like it's just been used and put down. So this word needs to be fixed because for whatever reason, the auto corrected it to sued. And so, but that definitely recontextualizes it. So I thought for a second, if it's laying on its side, maybe it's laying on its side for the same reason as this is, but it's not. In this case, the artist put it on its side specifically to attach the context to the idea that maybe a child just barely set it down. And so it's reminiscent of something that's not a standard use of glue. It's peeling skin because when you hear that, I think a lot of us think about, oh yeah, I used to do that too. And I like that for a couple of reasons because one is everybody recognizes this as glue, and as soon as you hear the title peeling skin, it starts, I mean, it's ambiguous enough that it starts giving you a lot of interesting ideas and opens the doors for a lot of really interesting considerations. And I like the fact this is a little bit this is a little bit more playful than I was expecting. But this peeling skin idea is a complete recontextualizing of the material inside as well. Like that's really fun to see. Okay, now look at this one. I love how this is photographed. This is the best photo yet out of everything, I think. The others are good, but this is dramatic. It has almost like a fashion plate type of sense of lighting and very dramatic image. This is something that I think is good enough that the image itself could be printed, done as a canvas print and hung up somewhere. If you really wanted to be snooty and hoity-toity as an artist around your family, that would be, and just don't tell them what it's about. But I like this. Okay, it's originally a safety pin, using to hold things together, used for clothing, sewing, or holding something together that has fallen apart. All right, so this is inexpensive and functional. All right, excellent. That's the history. Now, point of pain. Instead of displaying it as its normal function, I opened the safety pin and poked it into a white sheet of paper. Then I used a flashlight to give it a dramatic lighting effect. Having the pin open gives a sense of pain as if it might poke you. Absolutely. We're so used to seeing this as a safe remedy for when things fall apart or as a safe remedy for when things need to be held together. And I like that. And as point of pain, we have the point that it's stuck into the paper. We also have the point with the single light source shining down on it. And so both of those things come together. I think that this does a really good job visually and intellectually recontextualizing it. And it's become its own art piece, but giving it new meaning through presentation and context. Yes, absolutely. It's no longer just a tool, but a symbol of tension, pain, and how something meant to help can also hurt. Yes, I think that this person did a really good job in this. Excellent work. Nicely done. All right, so here we have, I think we talked about this a little bit. And that typically I would not like this the way it's photographed, but what they're doing is showing it in a museum type setting. And so this becomes the edges, two edges of a plinth or oh, what's the other word for it? Pedestal that it's setting on. So suddenly these lines even themselves have a new context. It's sitting on a pedestal. Here's a cap for it. So it's standing upright like a water bottle is, but I'm guessing that the recontextualization comes in putting it into a formal setting that belongs in a gallery. So let's see. So it started as a mass-produced standard insulated water bottle. And then it described the color and all this kind of and all that. And thousands of identical units are produced to meet the high consumer demand for aesthetic wellness gear. I like how they put that in quotes. So these are, billions of these are mass produced so they could be aesthetic. That's funny. And the title is Water Tongue. I have retitled the piece Water Tongue to shift the focus away from its utility and towards its physical form. Okay, look at that. Yep. By flipping open the straw lid and positioning the bottle right at the edge of a white desk, I've turned a functional mouthpiece into a silent protruding limb that seems to reach into the room. The specific placement recontextualizes the bottle, making it look like it is trying to communicate or taste the air rather than just sitting there waiting to be used. I like that perspective. That is really interesting. So the reason why it's at the edge of the desk is to build an tension of expectation. The dramatic isolation forced the viewer to see its silhouette as a sculpture instead of a common tool. So it is presented as a sculpture as well. So even though this is not intended to be a pedestal, I think it still kind of fits. Yeah, or what I was thinking still kind of fits because this is design it's presented, even though it's not in the center of the desk, it's on the edge to give it tension. It is presented, this is the exact center of the photo, so it's designed specifically to be or it's exhibited as a sculpture. I like that. Nicely done. And it canceling its familiar purpose through a new presentation. And it counts as a ready-made. I like that. And then they also bring in Joseph Kosuth, And it's simply the catalyst that invites the audience to participate in discussion about form. Yes, they're talking specifically about recontextualizing it, like Marcel Duchamp and the Dadaists did, but they're also talking about it as innervating its role as a conceptual piece by inviting internal discourse about what its new context. So nicely done, very nicely done. Okay, and then this, I really like how this is photoed. Very plain photograph, very plain background. All the attention is on the pan, and we can tell what it is. So this is stainless steel cooking pot. Normally put this over stovetop heat. Okay. However, we can't use it like this. So the new title is The Hat. I photographed it upside down to look more like a headpiece you could wear. And I think all of us have either seen cartoons or people in our own family who have worn pots on their head as part of, pretend play. And I don't know if you ever watched Simpsons cartoon that Bart and his dad, Homer, they'll do that all the time too and pretend to sword fight each other with sticks using these as helmets. So I like that. Nice. This ties in with a lot of juvenile buoyancy, a lot of fun stuff as a kid. And then it's designed specifically on in front of an infinity screen to further remove it from its context as a pot. I like that. Changing the orientation and context has changed its meaning. Well, it's no longer functional as a pot. It has to be something else. And hat is one thing we can give to it. But I like they're not talking about specifically what kind of hat it is or anything like that. However, by giving it a rather ambiguous title with just a single word, it allows room for us to make all those kind of connotations about it, reminding us of childhood and playfulness and things like that. I think this is really well done too. Nicely done. I think all five of those are well done. I think they've done a good job at fulfilling the role of what it is that we're doing. So again, for the discussion part of that, what you are doing is after submitting those things, make comments on three of your classmates, the work of three of your classmates. So five of these are available to look at, to peruse, which means that everybody who submitted can go back and make those three comments. So I'm going to go and, all right, I'm getting the next thing teed up. But Anna, by looking at those five examples closely, does that make more sense about what we're doing with this ready-made project and turning the ready-made object into a conceptualist art piece with our writing? All right, Anna says yes. Good, good, excellent. All right, the next thing we're going to look at is we're going to start examining the second part of the projects in this module, which is cocooning. Now, again, you're not going to be making anything new. You're going to be using objects that you found for the cocoon, but we're doing something very specific with it. One thing that I need to point out is that with the cocooning, well, one is the size. It needs to be a minimum of 9 inches in the shortest dimension. So it should be, size of a basketball as the very smallest. Now, what is really fascinating about this project in the past is people have not put much thought into it. And I say that's really fascinating because this is an opportunity to really go crazy and explore ideas that you're not going to have an opportunity to explore in any other environment. You looked at Judith Scott and Jean-Claude and Christo in the background for this, and both of them, and there's others too, did a lot of work on wrapping things. And we talked last week about how wrapping something engages our curiosity or the monkey mind. And just by the process of wrapping, we become more engaged because we want to find out what's underneath the wrapping. Oh, and I got so the air blew something into my eye. So my left eye is stinging now. And when you do this, I want you to consider the fact that part of this assignment, you need to significantly alter the silhouette and or shape of the object or objects that you're wrapping. Now these, notice that I think as for what I'm talking about on the left, this is a good example. Right here, this is a good example. These areas completely changed the structure. You know, it no longer looks like a bundle of sticks. But these are mostly to show what the process of wrapping can look like at the beginning. Of course, these are sticks. Jason and I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, and these are Jason's sculptures. He calls them stick Indians. There is a particularly disturbing uh, folklore creature that is part of the, excuse me, storytelling traditions of the indigenous peoples in the Pacific Northwest, from Washington all the way up to Alaska. And one of the names for these creatures or these beings is translated as stick Indian or stick walkers. And what is horrifying about these folklore creatures is they are made out of sticks and twigs that become self-aware and animate. They will form and mimic creatures and people. But what they like to do is when they attack you, they wrap around you and suck out your life force and suck out your blood. So it is a Native American tradition of vampires. That's particularly horrifying because one of the things, when you're walking alone at night and you hear the wind kind of flicking the sticks against each other, imagine being a kid who grew up listening to the stories about the stick vampires. You know, what does that sound like to you? It's terrifying. And Jason used to have nightmares about this. And in order to deal with those, he started making sculptures where he would find cool looking sticks and he'd wrap them with different materials and then he put them together in these structures. Some of them look like this, where they're critters that look like they can walk, and others are just really interesting constructions like this or this. And as he's doing this, you can tell, and like this, he's wrapping it with blue plastic wrap. And then he tied it with, it looks to me like it's orange string or rope. Here, this looks to me like the pattern paper you'd find at like a sewing or cloth store. This looks like strips of material. Then this looks like just shredded green paper that you'd use to pack in a box. And he's holding it all together with zip ties. And then this one, it looks like he's using some of the same materials, some of that plastic, some of that pattern paper and stuff like that. And he's, I don't know what he's tied it on with. Maybe he's just glued it on so tight that it's connected to the stick. But then he's combined them all together and wrapped it with this um, recycled grocery bags. Really, and very interesting things. For yours, I want you to give some thought into the thing that you're wrapping, you know, what's important for you to wrap, and then also give a lot of thought into the material that you're using to wrap it with. And again, as you're doing it, you need to wrap until the silhouette is no longer recognizable. All right. And you can use lots of different kinds of strings, lots of different kinds of stuff. But I want to show some examples of, there's three really good examples of what students have done in this assignment. Now, in this one, this student, they just collected a lot of the desk garbage that people clutter their desks up with from their own desk and also desk of a lot of people that they knew. They separated these items out by color, and then they use these items to kind of wrap around a children's backpack. And you can't see the backpack because it's so, all this stuff covers it. And then they held it in place with string and charging cords. And that's what all this is. And you can see the different colors. It's, you know, 6 or 7 different colors of different things that they put in here. And you can see like the rubber band fidget ball and a rubber ducky that somebody put on, and maybe a building block kind of thing, and crayons and all that kind of stuff. But it's a children's backpack underneath. And then it's a lot of stuff that remind us of childhood on top. And it's just kind of a fun explosion of color that I think is really cool. Then here, but there's so many different things that we can mostly recognize. We can't tell what the original object is because it's so completely covered. But a lot of the stuff that's used kind of hint at what that object is. Maybe it's stuff that was in that backpack before the backpack was wrapped with this stuff. But it's fascinating to me that they use the objects to help wrap the backpack. Now here, all of this, the student said that they had found an elephant plushie just on the side of the road. They go hiking all the time. And they for this project, they actually spent a week or so just hiking around and picking up garbage that they found out where they were hiking, out in the middle of nowhere, out public lands and stuff. And they took that plushie and they wrapped it with the garbage that they found. And here's wrappers from different things. These are old grocery bags that were just found blowing around in the weeds, string and wire that they found just on the ground. Here's a like a baby's mitten or sock that they used to put on that foot, and you can see the pieces of string. So they wrapped the original elephant doll completely that was they found that somebody had discarded, and they wrapped it completely with other garbage that they found it. And then they took it instead of photographing this on an infinity screen, they leaned it against one of the garbage bins that they found some of this stuff in. And I just thought that this was really very interesting. It reminds me a little bit of Fran Crow's stuff, where she packaged the stuff that people threw in the ocean to sell back to them as souvenirs. And I like this kind of repurposing of garbage because when you look at it, you start being engaged because you recognize some of these things, and then it dawns on you all at once, oh, this is all garbage. Look at that. Look at what people have just thrown away. I think that is really an interesting thing. And then this is made up of, and hopefully you can see there's a shirt with plastic bag from a cleaner over it. This is an ironing board and an iron. You can see the iron there. But what the person wrapped this in is just that the plastic wrap that you use to wrap pallets with. And they do some other things like there's shredded newspaper that they spray painted to decorate the shirt. And then some of this is painted, but the rest of it is just shredded newspaper. And the way to make this, if anybody's interested, is you roll several sheets of newspaper into a type thing about the size of a paper towel roll or paper towel tube. And then you start cutting down from one end, uh, not quite all the way down, and then start separating the newspaper by um, pulling the tube apart. And it makes things that almost look like a wreath of these long strips of newspaper. And so, this is spray painted, this is not, some of it is spray painted, but it's really fascinating because they kind of drape some of the plastic wrap onto this shirt a little bit, so it feels like one is flowing to another. But they told me that they wrapped this whole thing with a little bit of that plastic wrap, went at it with a blow dryer to heat it up and start melting it, and then started wrapping it again, putting different objects that were just in their um, apartment into it. So they wrapped it, several different layers of wrapping. Each time they would put more objects in, melt some of it, make it look kind of gross and creepy, like almost like it looks almost like spider webbing, cobwebbing. By melting it with the blow dryer, put more objects in, put another layer on it, different stuff like that. You can tell maybe these are embroidery hoops right here. Here's some thread. Some of the other things, maybe this is a case for AirPods. And here's a battery. Here's a thread spool, and maybe this is a thread spool as well instead of a battery. It probably is, but just different things. And then you can kind of tell that some of this paper is not newspaper at all. It looks like it might be either strips of cloth or maybe it comes from pattern paper as well. So there's some interesting things going on, but it's all stuff that's linked to their apartment and living around the ironing board and the cleaners. that they got the shirt from. It's all stuff so it has a theme. Now, this, that it's an ironing board, it's an iron, but they significantly changed the silhouette of this with all this draping and everything else. I think it's really fun to look at that. So this way, when you turn this in, you're going to be taking a photo of the object that is your cocooned set of objects or cocooned object. You're giving thought to both what you're wrapping and the materials you're using to wrap it with. You're going to take a photograph of this object as a final thing and using the photography guidelines. And then the next part of this is you're going to write about it. And that's what you're going to be submitting separately. The 3-paragraph write-up on this. And those 3 paragraphs is talking about the items that you selected and what they mean to you. Describe the materials you chose to wrap it with and what that means. Why are you using string, a rope, or strips of cloth? Are you using strips of grocery bags? What are you doing? And the third paragraph is what do you want people to get out of it? How do you want people to respond to it? So you're going to submit this as a document separately. And I'm thinking, so the first one is you submit a photo of just the cocoon object itself. Then you submit the writing. And then the third element of this is you don't need to respond to anybody else's work, but you are going to be submitting a photo of what you're doing and your write-up. So that's what this person did right here. So they submitted the photo of this and the write-up. All right, so that's what you need to submit for this one. And next week, we'll look at what people submitted and talk about them, what they submitted for the write-up. All right, and I'm all done with the material that I needed to cover today. Anna, do you have any questions about the stuff that we looked at?
Um, all I can think of is what we're wrapping has to be unrecognizable, right?
The silhouette itself needs to be uh, significantly changed so it's not easily recognizable. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Um,
So that image of the chair, I want to look at it in context next week, but that image of the chair, it's easily recognizable as a chair. And
mm,
I think that whoever submitted that, it might be a good idea for them to go back, rethink that a little bit in light of the parameters of the assignment, and maybe using another material to wrap the chair so that it changes the shape of the chair. And I'm thinking maybe like putting a cushion on the chair and using a sheet or something to wrap around it so it looks more like a Jean-Claude and Crystal type thing where you've turned it into almost a ghost, and then wrapping it with the green material to kind of give that color back into it. And that's just my knee-jerk reaction without looking at it too closely. But I'm thinking that we'll, as people turn these in over the next week or so, Wednesday we'll be able to look at everybody's and go more in depth into what they were doing. Does
mhm,
that answer your question?
yes.
Okay. And I this is why I would like people to consider using more than one object to wrap. Like put a couple objects together and wrap them together and wrap it enough so that the objects are hidden from view. And that way it's really hard for somebody to guess what's going on. And that's kind of what Judith Scott did quite a bit. She put multiple objects into her cocoons. And it becomes more satisfying to look at as a finished object too. And if somebody wants to do primarily one object, look at what Jean-Claude, go to the Jean-Claude and Christo website that I have in the background information and just explore the kinds of stuff that they did. The kinds of like when they wrapped bottles or cans in the late 50s and throughout the 60s, they were always very conscious of how the fabric folded and where the string or the rope went. And when they wrapped larger objects, they would actually do watercolor paintings where they would try to figure out what the folds of cloth would look like and the colors of rope or string that they would use. So they put a lot of thought into this. And some of the objects you can kind of recognize what's underneath, some of the objects you can't. Like when they would wrap women as their part of their model series, the women might have a hand sticking out or part of their face would be visible so they could breathe or a foot was visible, but all the rest of it, the plastic or fabric that they would use was bunched up and draping in different ways so you couldn't easily identify a human form underneath. So I want people to be thinking about that as they go into this project too. And I think it'll make it a lot more fun and a lot more engaging for your viewers as well.
Yeah,
That
yeah, I'm getting a better idea of it now.
Okay, good. Like those three examples that I show in the assignment are what I really want people to focus and target on because you really are finding it difficult to know what the object is underneath. Even the elephant toy, the only thing that kind of suggests that it was an elephant is because it has that garbage in an area where it looks like it might be a trunk. And
Hmm.
that's I really like that. And even though you can tell the ironing board is obviously an ironing board, so much plastic wrap is draped and stretched over that it starts looking like if you found an ironing board that had been attacked by spiders for 50 years, that's might be what it's looking like because there's so much stuff on it. And that's what I wanted people to go for. Um, one of the most disappointing ones that I've seen is somebody took their biomorphic carving and tore off about 15 strips of blue masking tape and draped over the top of it so it just hung down like hair and said, "Yeah, that's I've wrapped it. That's done." What's the point? It seemed looked like a massive waste of masking tape. So I don't want anybody to do that. At the very least, get a whole bunch of plastic grocery bags and cut them into strips and just go start wrapping whatever it is until you can't see it anymore, until it gets the size of a basketball. And then because with this kind of a thing, when you're dealing with conceptual art, a little bit doesn't do anything. A little bit is a waste of time. But when you start going overboard, what is really weird that happens is the more and more that you put on, the more you move away from the original meaning of the object, the original connotations, and the more you start making your viewer question, why are they doing this? They put so much energy into it, it must mean something. And sometimes the only thing it means is I wanted to fulfill the assignment and wrap this so that it was the size of a basketball. That may be the only meaning, but it engages your viewer and it engages their curiosity. And that's another element that we're going for. Does all of that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yeah.
All right, excellent. Any other questions that you might have?
Um, I want to switch to service learning, but I don't think those assignments are showing for me.
Okay. I'm gonna share my screen really quick. I say really quick, but I have to hit all the buttons, so it takes a couple minutes. All right. So go to Module 7A, and what you're going to do is go down to Artist Research or Service Learning, click on that, and you're going to resubmit the assignment and say, hey,
Um,
switching to Service Learning. As soon as you do that, I will see that, it will pop up, and I'll be able to switch all the other assignments. And if somebody else is going to be doing this, one thing that I've told Anna is that she's already done work on the original route that she was taking. I am not going to be getting rid of any of those assignments. They will function as extra credit for this kind of thing because you did the work and you're going to be doing the other work on top of it. So you deserve the extra credit, and it's going to be a chunk of extra credit. But that's why those other ones aren't showing yet. Does that make
Mm.
sense now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So as soon as you make that change and resubmit, I will go back in and make the change from my end. And then those other assignments that you've already completed for the artist research, they will show up as finished, but you will not be required to do any of the future artist research assignments. Instead, you'll just turn in the service learning stuff you did.
Hmm.
All right?
I just resubmitted the assignment. So,
Okay. Excellent. So I will make that change this evening and you'll be able to see it.
hmm, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Um, if there's no other questions, I hope everybody has a wonderful week and weekend. I look forward to showing off to everybody what you guys are doing with this stuff. But remember, we have about a month left, a little bit less, and I want everybody to use this time to turn in the assignments that they haven't turned in yet. One, two, resubmit whatever you need to, and if I don't respond and regrade right away, then uh, an email doesn't seem like it's reaching me for whatever reason, then text my phone, tell me the section you're in, which is X02, and your name, and I will go back through and double and get take care of that. Now, last Wednesday I was all cut up with grading, and now a lot of people turn in stuff over the weekend, so I will get that graded again and and get caught up. I love when people are turning stuff in, and I notice that people are resubmitting stuff, and I love regrading the stuff that you resubmit. So if you guys have any questions or if I'm not grading fast enough, remind me and I will do everything I can to make sure you're taken care of. But until then, you guys have a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. We'll see you.
See ya then.